What separates a low-stakes grinder from a high-stakes crusher? Part 2, with a twist. I'm going to take two winning poker players, one who plays low stakes and one who plays nosebleed high stakes, and have them play the same 5 hands to see just how differently they think about poker. First, let's meet the players.
Hi, Corey Eyring. I mainly play 2-5, but I've played upwards of 100-200, and I got cooked. Everyone thinks I'm bad at poker. I have a poker blog, and I'm probably mainly known for gambling my net worth. Here to answer some questions about poker theory. Let's see if anyone cares.
My name is Charlie Carroll, and I started playing poker 11 years ago. My story was that I turned $50 into millions of dollars. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I retired and I started my charity. And I also started Elite University, which is my coaching site. I've coached people for thousands of hours, mostly for free, across all of the stakes, from absolute free roll micro stakes to the highest stakes that people can play on. By the way, thank you very much for inviting me on. I am very recently a huge fan of your content.
So we are both retired, washed up poker pros.
We're greasy old men just trying to get our way back in the industry.
For this experiment, I'm going to walk them through pre-flop so they all get to the flop in the exact same way. Then they will walk us through their thought process post-flop. Now remember, I said there is a twist. So for the first hand, they will have a 1-minute shot clock for each decision. For the second hand, they will have 45 seconds. Third hand, 30 seconds. Fourth hand, 20 seconds. And on the fifth and final hand, they will have only 10 seconds for every decision. Let's turn up the pressure. Now, I have gone through these hands and built out contingencies for every scenario that is likely to occur. For example, if hero checks back the flop, villain will bet 40 on the turn, or if hero raises river, villain will fold to any amount over 550. Ready? Let's jump in. All right, so in this first hand, we are playing 5-10, 2,000 effective, folds all the way around to us on the button. We're going to open to $40. In the small blind, the villain is going to call. The small blind in this hand is a winning player, kind of an ABC pro. He is winning at 5-10. May fall into some of the same pitfalls that a lot of live pros fall into. Maybe calling a little bit too much pre-flop, floating flops a little bit too wide, telegraphing their hand strength with their sizing just a little bit, and probably under bluffing slightly on turns and rivers, especially when we take aggressive action. So that's a description of the villain in hand, who is going to call from the small blind. We're going to go heads up to a flop, which comes King 7-3 with 3 clubs. And at this point, the villain checks it over to us. And 1 minute is on the clock. Ready, set, go.
Okay, small blind's gonna be a lot tighter calling than the big blind. I think on a king high board, people don't defend nearly as much as they should, especially on a monotone board. People just aren't finding bluffs. So I think we can bet pretty liberally with our range, just generally betting small, like 25 or 30%. For 85, you could even just get away with flicking in a quarter. And I think there's gonna be a lot of snap folds. I would probably just bet small and fold to aggression because people underbluff in these spots.
Perfect, so 25?
Yeah, cool.
And he is going to call. Turn is an ace of clubs. 1 minute to do whatever you want. Ready, set, go.
The majority of our range is going to want to check here, including hands that contain a club. I think that if we bet, we are actually quite polar. Even though we have top pair, it falls into like the middling of our range. We're not trying to bloat a pot. We have enough showdown. We still beat all of his king X, 7X, and middling pairs that call the flop. I think we just check back and see a river.
All right, so we are going to check back. River is a 7. He bets 85. You have 1 minute on this river. Ready, set, go.
Insanely hard to find bluffs here. I think he has to turn king X into a bluff, 3X into a bluff, 5-4, hands of that nature, but generally he has 0 pure bluffs in his range, I think. What is his range when we show up in this river? 7X, king X, flushes, ace X. Like he's betting ace X or king X for value, or even 7X on a 4 flush board. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
5 seconds.
Club, I would just fold. I wouldn't really give it too much thought. I would just find a better spot in a soft game.
Something you really want to learn early about these monotone boards is that you can use a lot of small sizes if you want to. Now, that doesn't mean you have to balance them. There's a ton of hands that have just absolutely whiffed completely. Ace 5 of spades, or he's got deuces, no club, or he's got like queen, jack of hearts. There's a million of these hands. So pretty often when I'm bluffing, I will go small. And when I'm value betting, I'll choose a different size. Sometimes against some people, I have to balance it. It's one of those spots that's very face up if the person's a very thinking player. Given the villain description that you've given me, I'll just choose a small size and exploit the inelasticity in his range. And so you bet something around 15.
So we are going to go 15. He is going to call. And the turn is now in ace of clubs. And he is going going to check it over to us. Ready, set, go.
The two options that I can think of are dependent on how good my live reads are and how good my reads are on this player in general. If our reads are going to be pretty good, which is going to be pretty often against this player type, and given that he telegraphs his hand strength, I think that this is going to be the right person to do it against. We can check back thinking that he's probably going to bluff pretty big. He's probably going to choose a pretty big size, and then if he has a smaller club, he'll end up betting pretty small. It's not super common for him to just turn up with like the queen of clubs. There's not too many hands. The other option is to bet small, like 15 again on the turn, thinking he's going to call his king
5
X.
seconds.
But for this person, I'll check.
Oh, the river is a 7, pairing the board. He bets 75. You have 1 minute. Ready, set, go.
If I have a tight image, I can consider raising here. Given my image, I would pretty much always go for the live read, usually call. Usually when people are betting this size, they're only representing the queen or jack of clubs, maybe the 10 of clubs. And he is going to turn up with a bunch of bluffs on the river. Something like 6s, no club, something along those lines. Going for a raise here, you can very likely get the range fold, depending on the player type. And this is where your intuition has to really kick in. Like, imagine he has got the jack of clubs. How much do you think that he will fold? Could be 400, could be 500, could be 600, could be 700. Only the intuition of reading the situation and reading the player can kick in. I think I'll go for something like 575.
All right, so hand 1, Corey elected to c-bet relatively small here, and he decided to check back the turn when he made top pair. And when Villain came out and bet a chunky size on this river, Corey just decided that Villain was under bluffing here, so therefore he would fold, which seems like a pretty good play. Charlie, on the other hand, elected to go with an even smaller c-bet size here on the flop, just figuring that Villain's gonna have so many hands that just have to snap fold, even to a very tiny size. He also checked back the turn, and then on the river, he deduced, just like Corey, that Villain is under bluffing here, but then he also figured out that because he bet so small on the flop, Villain would probably fast play pocket 7s, pocket 3s, a good amount on the flop. Villain just never has pocket kings here, especially because he has an ace in his hand. It's just very unlikely that the Villain here ever has a full house, so Charlie elected to turn his hand into a bluff. These are all real hands, by the way. These are hands that I played. I actually took a similar line to Charlie here. I raised slightly bigger on the river. I believe I made it 700 in game. So Villain actually flashed the queen of clubs and he folded the queen high flush. So the difference between Corey and Charlie's play on this river, Corey found a good play, which is folding to a Villain, which is under bluffing. Charlie actually considered all of the options here and found an even higher EV play to bluff raise on this river and get Villain to fold the queen high flush. So after hand 1, we'll keep track of results here, and this isn't going to be an end all be all because we're just going to keep track of results against Villain's exact hand and not against their range. But Corey after hand 1 is down $65 or 6.5 big blinds. Charlie after hand 1 is up $140 or 14 big blinds. All right, next hand here. This time we are playing 2040. We are 7,000 effective, so it's going to fold around to us on the button. We are going to open with 8-4 of hearts to $110 with 2 recreational players in the blinds. And the big blind, who is going to be the Villain in the hand, is going to call. This player probably falls into a lot of pitfalls that trying recreational players fall into in today's live games. He's probably calling a little bit too much pre-flop, not 3-betting nearly enough out of the big blind, floating too much on the flop, fast playing his strong hands at slightly too high of a frequency, and he does have a fold button. He has seen that the player pool under bluffs in many nodes, so when a lot of money goes in, he is capable of folding, and like most trying recreational players, he is massively under bluffing himself in almost every single node. So he is going to call. We are going heads up to a flop, which is ace queen 3 with a heart, and he is going to check it over to us. This time we have 45 seconds on the clock. Ready, set, go.
On ace queen X boards, button versus big blind, we're actually a lot similar in range than I used to think. So I think a lot of people just bet small here. The strategy, I think, in theory, should be overbet or check because we just show up with so many hands that are whiffs here. If we're going to choose this one to bet, then I think we should either bet like 300, 325, or just check, I think.
10 seconds?
I don't know, just check.
Cool.
I think
So we are going to check back. Now the turn is an offsuit 5. He comes out and bets 180. Ready, set, go.
I mean, we have nothing but a gut shot. Still have ace X. We still have queen X. We still have flush draws. We're not always going to be betting these hands. I actually don't know what to do here. This is actually a blunder spot. I think just against a player like this...
5, 2,
fold.
Fold.
So the main thing that you want to be focusing on here, the main heuristic, is exploiting inelasticity. So imagine he's got an ace. He's going to be calling 40 and he's going to be calling 300. If he's got clubs, it's the same kind of story. In these spots, you want to be value betting big and bluffing small. So you play big pots of big hands, small pots of small hands. Mathematically, it works out very, very nicely in your favor. We have the dream hand to be double barreling with and on pretty much every single turn. So I'm going to be betting something around 50.
So we go 50 here, and he is going to call turn, which is an offsuit 5, and he checks it over. Give us your thoughts. Ready, set, go.
So my mama always used to tell me this one thing. Charles, let's call Charles when I was young. Never try and bluff a fish off top pair. I often thought, I see this as a challenge. Find a size that he folds almost everything. How much do we need to bet for him to fold his 10? Because if he's folding his 10, he's folding a ton of other things. So for that,
8 seconds.
I'm probably going to bet something around 885.
All right. So we go 885. He does call. The river is an ace, and he checks to us. Ready, set, go.
So his range is going to be very condensed here. Actually, a lot of it is going to be the 3x and 5x of clubs. Like a lot of it is going to be that. There's also going to be some sticky ace x, although I do think most of that's going to fold on the turn. Every now and again, ace deuce. Every now and again, ace 10, ace jack. Can we get a range folds apart from versus ace 5? I think the answer is yeah. I think I go something like 4,300 and just assume we're going to get the range fold bar ace 5. So 4.3k.
So we go 4.3k. He is going to fold. Let me ask you this. If the reason you went 4.3k instead of all in is because just you save a little bit of money against a hand like ace 5, right?
Yeah, I think people are going to probably fold either way. And then when he does have like either ace 5 or a slow played ace 3, or somehow like 5s with a club on the flop, we lose 2k less.
All right, in the second hand here, Corey elected to play an overbet or check strategy on this board, which I kind of like. Like I would probably play an overbet or check strategy on this board quite a lot as well. Probably for different reasons than Corey mentioned. I wouldn't be playing an overbet or check strategy because it's theory or because it's good. I would be playing this strategy because I think villains are just going to have too much ace X calling from the big blind, and they're just probably not going to fast play enough of their strong hands. Now, this board is a little bit more wet and dynamic than most ace high boards, so I may just deviate and bet range here, figuring villain will raise off hands like ace 3 or pocket 3s or ace queen. But Corey elected to check back here. Going to the turn, villain came out and bet big on the turn. Corey's just got a naked gut shot, so he found a fold. Charlie, on the other hand, elected to c-bet his range, chose a small size, which I like on this particular board. Villain did call. Charlie went with the double barrel here on the turn and chose a very big size, going over 2x pot on this turn, and villain called, going to the river, which was an ace. And Charlie figured at this point the only brick wall he really runs into on this river is a hand like ace 5, where Charlie figured that pocket 3s would probably raise on the flop, ace queen would raise on the flop, or 3-bet pre-flop. So the only hand he's really worried about running into that's going to call on this river is a hand like ace 5. He figured on this river he could get the folds from hands like ace jack, ace 4, ace 10, ace deuce that stuck around to the big bet on the turn. So he went for the big boy chunky overbet size here on this river and got villain to fold. Villain actually had ace jack in this hand. In game, I chose a slightly different strategy than Charlie. I actually decided to go very, very small. I went smaller on the turn, so I figured villain just had more ace X getting to the river. I was worried that villain may not fold ace X, worried that I may run into some brick walls like ace 5. I went 20% pot on this river to try to get villain just to fold his flush draws, his 3x of clubs, his 5x of clubs, and actually villain just 3x'd it on this river. I did not think a 3x raise was the size that villain would take with hands like full houses. Thought he was just trying to go for thin value with a hand like ace jack or ace 10. So I actually bet 3-bet jammed on this river, and villain folded the ace jack. So on hand 2, Corey lost about 2.75 big blinds, and Charlie won 26.5 big blinds. So after 2 hands, Corey down about 9 bigs, Charlie up over 40 bigs so far. All right, next hand here, and we are playing 20-40 again. This time it's going to fold around to a fish on the button who is going to open almost 9x here. He's going to open to 350. This player is kind of a typical live fish, is going to be transparent with his sizing. He is going to be passive. He's going to be under bluffing. He's probably going to be calling too much, specifically on flops and turns, probably going to be fast playing his value way too much, and is going to be massively under bluffing. Just so when he does open for this size, it's probably going to indicate strength, and it is going to fold to us here. We are in the big blind with ace queen of clubs. Obviously against a range that's going to open the 9x. This hand not feeling good about 3-betting. We can throw that option out the window. Maybe folding could just be an option, but we decide to call here. Pretty good hand, hard to fold this one. Would probably just pitch it if we had like ace queen off. So we are going to call. Flop comes queen 8-4 now, and we are going to check it over, and he is going to bet $600 into 720 on this flop. You have 30 seconds for each decision point. Ready, set, go.
Yeah, if we hit a queen, are we good? If we hit an ace, are we good? Are we going to get value from tens or jacks? Probably not. Like, I don't know. I don't really like this. I would probably just fold this pre.
All right, 30 seconds. Ready, set, go.
See, like, this is the problem with playing this hand, because now where the fuck are we? We can't fold now because we have top pair and a backdoor flush draw. Raising would be a punt because we're just going to fold out hands like jacks, tens, and get called by aces, kings. Yeah, this is like why we're in like no man's land. Not looking too good already, but when we call pre, we have to call flop.
We're gonna call queen of hearts. 30 seconds. Ready, set, go.
I think we could actually consider leading this card. Like, checking is certainly standard, but against a fish, they're not going to fold aces and kings. They're probably not going to even fold jacks or tens on this card, because they're going to be like, oh, you're leading a queen? That makes no sense. They're probably going to check aces and kings. So against the fish, I actually kind of want to go like 1,200 here.
1,200. 1.2k and a call going to the river, which is a beautiful offsuit deuce. Ready, set, go.
When we take this line, when we lead turn, I think we have one option, which is to go all in here. And he's going to be like, oh, he's just bluffing with jack 10, 10, 9, jack 9, all of our gut shots on the flop that we have to turn into a bluff, because now we need to find bluffs. Never bluff this spot. You don't have to be balanced, especially against a whale for this size pre. Just fold all those hands pre. I don't think he's going to fold aces, kings. He might even hero call with jacks or tens. We don't want to check this, given the option to check back. I'm all in.
Flop comes queen 8-4 with the 4 of clubs, rainbow. We check it over.
Whoa, we checking? No, that's fine. Hey, enjoy your check.
Okay, we check it over to him on the button, and he goes 600 here.
Oh, thank God we checked.
On ready, set, go.
So this is actually a really good spot for a speech play. And what I would do here is make some kind of big gesture and be like, man, I guess I have to call. Hope you're not trapping me. Something like that. Because I really don't want him to double barrel, because I will fold to a turn bet. I think his range is going to be some aces and kings, a decent amount. And then it's going to be like some random, just like pocket jacks, pocket tens, ace king, ace jack, ace nine, hands like this. So we have to call and hope he doesn't double barrel the turn, because we're probably folding unless we improve.
Turn is a queen, bringing him backdoor hearts. Ready, set, go.
We need to think of a sizing. Again, assuming that his range is going to be ace king, pocket jacks, pocket tens, he's not going to be double barrel in this turn in a million years. So we just lead a size that he's still going to be calling with a random queen, aces, kings, jacks, and tens. You have to use your intuition. I don't know what the guy looks like, but let's just assume we can get all in by the river if we go something like 1,300.
And a call. River is the beautiful offsuit deuce. Ready, set, go.
So obviously we're shoving, but the question is, how do we shove? And this is something where if you can increase the chances of him calling by 5% by doing something live, then your win rate is just gonna, in these big spots, is just gonna be so much more. So you have to look nervous, but you can't look like you're intentionally looking nervous. So you do your best to go stare for a bit. Wait for the
3 seconds
to get down. Yeah, wait for the clock. I'm all in.
All right, so hand 3 here. Corey actually kind of wanted to fold pre-flop, which I could get on board with. I think that would be perfectly fine to fold here pre-flop. Queen 8-4, check called on the flop, and then found the nice donk on the turn, just correctly deducing that villain would almost always check back if he had an overpair or even a hand like pocket jacks here, but those hands are just never folding. And then goes for the big boy jam here, figuring villain's just not going to believe it, not going to be able to fold a hand like kings or aces. And villain did in fact call here. Charlie took almost the exact same line, just went a little bit bigger here on the turn to slightly reduce the SPR on the river, donked all in on the river again, and villain did call, and he showed that he had pocket kings here. So both players played this hand very, very well. So in hand 3, both players won stacks here, up about $6,020 each for 150.5 big blinds. Corey is up 141 bigs, and Charlie is up 191 bigs after 3 hands. Next hand here, we're playing 5-10, 2.2k effective, going to fold around to us on the button. Going to open king 3 of spades to 35. Fish in the small blind is going to call, and now a reg in the big blind is going to call. Fish is just a typical loose, passive, kind of losing player at 5-10. So the reg in the big blind, kind of a tight ABC winner. I would say that when the pots are small, he's bluffing at an appropriate amount, calling at an appropriate amount, folding at an appropriate amount. When the pots get really big, I would say he's probably under bluffing and over folding, like most live regs. Probably tends to fast play his hands a little bit bit too much on early streets and probably tends to under bluff specifically on later streets. So those are the notes on the reg and the fish. We are going to a flop, which comes 9-9 deuce with a couple of spades. Going to check around to us on the button here. And for this hand, the shot clock is at 20 seconds. Ready, set, go.
I think on this board texture, we can just get away with betting very small because both players are going to fold out a majority of their range. Against two opponents, I generally like to go half pot, so I'd probably just bet 50.
Small blind folds, and the big blind check raises to 175. Ready, set, go.
On this board texture, it looks like we have nothing because we're just going to open from the button. We have so many hands in our range. It looks like we missed this flop. So if he is going to check raise, that means he can check raise quite liberally with hands like 8-7, Jack 10, hands of this nature. So I'm going to call.
Turn is a queen of hearts. He goes 300. Ready, set, go.
Against this size, I think we can actually consider folding. I mean, if he's starting to underbluff turns, then he's actually really weighted towards value. I don't know if he's spazzing with like a hand like sixes.
3.
Probably fold.
So you can actually bet really small here, hoping that somebody's going to raise, because if they raise as a bluff, you win this pot pretty often, like pretty often. That being said, we are going to be double barreling. We want them to call the raise highs on the flop, so we have two choices. We either bet 40 or we bet 20. I bet 20 because I want to double barrel this hand against ace highs.
So small blind is going to fold, and big blind's going to check raise to 70. Ready, set, go.
So generally when he goes this small, I don't think he's going to be too weighted towards 9x, but I think he'll telegraph his size, his hands with his size on the turn pretty often. He's going to have some pocket pairs, he's going to have the odd deuce X, and he's going to have a few bluffs at backdoors that people feel like they have to do. So obviously calling, but always thinking about his range.
So we are going to call. Turn, which is a queen of hearts. He is going to go 170. Ready, set, go.
All right, so I was hoping that he was going to go small so we could pounce on that, make him fold sevens or something, you know, 6s, 5s, something like that. He's now relatively credibly repping a 9. That being said, I don't think he's going to triple off if he is bluffing too often, so I'm actually going to go for a snap call here on the turn to make it look more like I have something like aces or maybe a tricky 9 myself.
So we are going to call. Now the river is a king of hearts. He is going to bet 250. Ready, set, go.
All right, so here's what I do. I mean, I guess I'm all in. That's what I do.
We're going to move all in. Give us your reasoning of why you decided instantly to move all in here.
So it really feels like he has a 9. I don't think that somebody chooses this size as a bluff. It just doesn't feel very natural to go small on the river as a bluff. There's no other value hand that will go this size. If he has even a straight, he'll end up going bigger. If he has a boat, he'll go bigger. People hate to call all in, especially when they think they're uncapped. You get in these weird spots sometimes where somebody thinks they're uncapped, but they're not because they've done something to telegraph the strength of their hand. So you get to really pounce on what should be an uncapped range, but it happens to be a capped range.
So we move all in, and he's going to tank and tank and tank. Finally, he folds.
Let's go!
All right, hand 4 here, and Corey chose to c-bet the flop, got check raised and called. And then when villain chose a big size on the board, on a paired board with just a king high flush draw, Corey elected to fold here. Charlie also c-bet the flop, but chose a much smaller size here multi-way, which just gave him a little bit more stack depth to maneuver even when he did get check raised. And when villain barreled the turn with this deep of stacks behind to a smaller bet, Charlie elected to call, going to the river, which was a king. And when villain came out and bet 250 on this river, Charlie just astutely pointed out here that when villains choose this size, they just get a little bit more greedy when they have a hand like pocket 2s, queen 9, king 9. They're just targeting top of range here when they have those types of hands. And this type of bet felt like it was trying to get called by exactly the type of hand that Charlie had. So Charlie just deduced here that yes, he's got the king blocker in his hand, but it doesn't really matter. Blockers don't matter when villains are face up with their range because villains will just choose a bigger size here when they have a full house. So Charlie elected to go all in here. And he pointed out something I thought was really interesting. Regs in the spot in the big blind will just say, well, you know, I've got pocket deuces and queen 9 and king 9 to call here, so I'll wait for a better spot to call. But actually they don't have those hands because those hands rarely choose a size on the river. So Charlie, figuring all that out in a very limited amount of time, goes all in on this river, gets villain to fold. I chose the same line as Charlie here, although I did go a little bit bigger on the flop. Villain did not show, but because he tanked on the river and then folded, I am assuming that he folded a 9. All right, so after 4 hands, Corey is up about 120 big blinds and Charlie up 247 big blinds, so really pulling into the lead here. All right, let's turn up the pressure. This time we are playing 20-40, and we're going to open king 10 of spades and the cutoff to 110. A recreational player is going to 3-bet on the button to 350. Couple notes on this guy. I would say when all the money goes in, he's probably under bluffing, but he is capable of 3-betting pretty aggressively. He is probably c-betting and double barreling a decent amount. He does have a fold button because he has seen, especially from pros, that pros are definitely under bluffing in this game. So he's capable of folding, probably under bluffing himself, specifically on later streets, but he does tend to be aggressive, specifically pre-flop and on flops and sometimes turns as well. So we are going to call here with king 10 of spades, and now the flop comes 9-8-3 with a couple of spades. So we are going to check it over, and now our opponent checks back. The turn is a jack of hearts, and now at this point there is only 10 seconds on the clock. Ready, set, go.
You're 10k effective.
3, 2.
1.3k. I think that they're just not going to ever check hands like aces, kings, queens, especially jacks and tens. They're just never going to have that strong of a hand here. So they just kept their range checking back flop. We have a lot of strong hands here, and I think this one works pretty well to go nuts with, especially when he is capped.
So he is going to call, and now the river is an offsuit deuce. Ready, set, go.
I'm going to look at the dealer, give him a little glance up, and then say all in.
So I'm probably going to be betting something along the lines of 450.
450 is the decision. All right, walk us
450 is the
through your thought process on why you want to go 450.
So we're winning this pot. There's no two ways about it. The question is, can we bet a size that ace queen off is still going to be calling, assuming we can just win on, I think, literally every single river apart from a 10 against ace queen off. And then, because I think a lot of his range is just going to be ace king, ace queen. Some ace jack in there as well, so maybe some king jack, but probably just a lot of ace king, ace queen. We're going as size, we're getting value from these hands on the turn, and then we're going to be winning on pretty much every single river.
River's a deuce. Ready, set, go.
So this man is capped. He's going to fold because we're a tight looking old hungry
3,
horse. So I'm going to bet
2.
something like 4.2k.
All right, for the last hand here with king 10, Corey elected to check on the flop. Villain checked back, and then he came out with a big boy overbet on the turn, and Villain elected to call here, and then Corey just figured, well, you know what? On this wet dynamic flop, Villain is just not going to check back when he has aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens on this particular board. So I think he is very, very capped here. Sure, he could sometimes have a jack, but I think a jack is folding to more than 2x pot here. So Corey put all the money in here in a big boy bluff, and Villain actually folded. Charlie elected to go a little bit smaller on the turn to try to keep in those hands like ace king, ace queen that would maybe float for one bet here, and the Villain called. And then when we got to the river, Charlie also elected to go with the big boy massive overbet bluff. Charlie, I think, found something pretty interesting going smaller on the turn because it just would encourage Villain to float wider with most of his range that would check back the flop. For example, ace king, ace queen. Corey actually ended up winning more money in this hand because he got in more money on the turn. But Charlie's strategy of the small bet on the turn I thought was pretty cool, just to keep Villain's range wider getting to the river. And Villain actually did fold here on this river, and he said he had ace jack. In this hand, I took a little bit different strategy than both of these players. I actually decided to check the turn again, figuring that if Villain did have a jack, if he did have a hand like ace jack or queen jack or king jack that checked back the flop, he would now stab on the turn and put money in for me, and then I could check raise on the turn and then pile in the money on the river, and check raising actually increases our fold equity. And then if Villain did check back the turn, well, he's almost certainly going to have a hand like ace king or ace queen, and I don't really need 2 bets to get that hand to fold, so then I can just come out and overbet the river, get all the ace king and ace queen to fold, and if he does bet the turn, then I can get jack X to put in a lot of money here on the turn, and then I can get that hand to fold on the river. All right, so after hand 5 part 1, Corey is up 163 big blinds, and Charlie is up 268 big blinds. So Corey closing the gap just a little bit on this hand. All right, now we're gonna throw a little twist in. Instead of the river being an offsuit deuce, now it is a deuce of spades, bringing in the front door flush draw. And now, once again, 10 seconds on the clock. Ready, set, go. 5, 2.
2100.
And he calls.
So we're going to bet something like 350. This is called a BSTI. You can come check out how I teach these things, called bet small to induce.
350 on this river. and he is going to call.
Even these types of recreational players can find bluffs when they turn up here with the ace of spades. I think that they often forget that they can't have too many nut flushes after they check the flop. But I think just purely for the technical term is the spaz equity, I think smaller is better.
All right, so now we did part 2 of this hand, and remember Corey overbet on the turn. Now we made the river a 2 of spades, and Corey just correctly figuring here that he's going to jam when he bricks on this river to get villain to fold top of his range, which would probably be a hand like ace jack or something like that. But when he does get there, he realizes he needs to size down to ensure that villain's going to call with hands like jack X, and Corey did get the call here on this river. Charlie, once again, remember, went a little bit smaller on the turn to keep villain's range wide, and then when he got there on the river, elected to bet very, very small here on this river, trying to get villain to spaz with hands like ace king or ace queen, which I think is a really interesting play, because although villain did turn up with a hand like ace jack in the spot, and Charlie just got called on this river, so he won kind of the minimum against villain's exact hand, I think this play against villain's range is actually pretty good here, because most of villain's range, I think, getting to this river is going to be ace king, ace queen type hands, and those hands may either call this tiny size, or it may induce a spaz at some frequency. So after hand 5, part 2, Corey is up 258 big blinds, Charlie up about 299 big blinds, so Corey closing the gap here once again as we go into the final hand. All right, so now one final twist. We're going to play the exact same hand, except instead of having king 10 of spades, we are going to have pocket 8s. So we're going to start this over the exact same flop, except now we have middle set, and we do have the option here on the flop to either check it over and flow or donk. 10 seconds on the clock. Ready, set, go.
Could go either way again. I think I'd still rather check raise than lead.
So we're going to check. The turn is a jack here, and he could have a different hand. I may give him the same hand, may give him a different hand. Ready, set, go.
I mean, hilariously enough, I know I said I could play 8s this way, but now I'm actually more prone to check raise.
Can you walk us through why you decided to check on this turn?
He is never going to have pocket jacks. He's never going to have pocket 9s. His range is just not that strong. Like ace 4 suited, ace 5 suited. And so those hands are just not going to put money in. So by checking, we give him a little bit of rope to bluff, or we can just blow to pot more than he would with a hand like jack X.
He bets 500, and you have 10 seconds here. Ready, set, go. 2.
I'd make it like
1.
2.2.
So we are going to go 2.2K. He is going to call. River's an offsuit deuce. Ready, set, go.
4K.
4K, and he is going to fold.
So my gut says I have to lead this spot. I have to go a size. His ace size is going to call. His overpair is going to raise. I'm going to bet 200.
All right, 200, and he is going to call. Turn is a jack. Ready, set, go.
So he's going to have a lot of ace king, ace queen, ace jack. Large part of his range is this, by the way. So I'm going to bet something like 300.
He is just going to call. Now the river is offsuit deuce. Ready, set, go.
So I'm going to pretty quickly check, and I can give my reasons, but I only have 10 seconds.
Yeah, give us your reasons first.
So he's gonna have some ace king and ace queen, and the reason I'm quickly checking is because he's a thinking player, and when he sees a quick check, he's gonna think that I have showdown value, so he's gonna think his ace queen and ace king aren't good. He's also gonna have a bunch of jack X. He'll have some ace jack and some king jack. I think all of his jack X are gonna be value betting. I think his ace king and ace queen are gonna be bluffing against a snap check. I think if we tank check, they might decide they might want to check behind the flop, but I think against a snap check, a thinking recreational player is gonna be bluffing.
He bets 1K. Ready, set, go.
I would look at him, look really confused, and be like, 3,500. This is a size that if he has jack 10, queen jack, king jack, or ace jack, he's going to be calling.
Now we replayed the same spot, except we had pocket 8s. Corey elected to check on the flop. Going to the turn, Corey elected to check again. I don't necessarily love checking here with this hand, because I think villain's just going to have mostly showdown value when he checks back the flop, and checking here just encourages him to check back again when he does have hands like ace king or ace queen. I think going for a big bet on this turn just to target jack X is fine, and I think going for a small bet on this turn just to target his ace highs is also fine, but I think checking on this turn when we do have a thick value hand is not all that great, because check raising actually maximizes fold equity. So as you hear, Corey got in a lot of money here on this turn, and this was actually the line I took when I had king 10 of spades, so he got in a lot of money on this turn. I had written out in the contingencies here that if we check raise turn and then bet river, villain's only calling less than 2/3 pot, and yeah, I'm not 100% sure exactly what the line is, but I just do think when you check raise a turn in a 3-bet pot and then bomb the river, this is where villains become very, very elastic. They start folding pretty good hands. It looks so strong to check raise the turn and then bomb the river, which is why I really prefer this line as a bluff. Corey went 4,000, which I thought was a little bit too big, even when villain does have a hand like ace jack, because this line just looks so strong. We had this in the contingencies before the hand started. The villain's only calling a 2/3 pot size bet after check raising on the turn, so we had villain fold on this river. Charlie, on the other hand, took a very cool and unorthodox line here. He actually decided to donk on the flop to get villain to float with hands like ace king or ace queen, and then to encourage him to raise with hands like overpairs, which I thought was a pretty unique, interesting line. And then going to this turn, Charlie actually decided to donk small again to encourage the floats with ace king and ace queen once more. Villain did call. And then we go to the river. Charlie actually decided to check, which I thought was pretty cool with the description of this villain. Villain will sometimes bluff when he does get here with a hand like ace king or ace queen, just figuring that he may not have showdown value. And if he does have a hand like jack X, well, we said that villain was the type to bet thinly. And when Charlie donks very, very small and then checks on this river, an aggressive kind of thinking recreational player on this river is probably going to put in a thin value bet with a hand like ace jack here. Villain bet on this river. Then Charlie went for the check raise. And I think this line just looks a lot less strong than the line that Corey took, because Corey check raised the turn and then blasted the river. Whereas a subtle delineation here is because Charlie donked twice, very, very small, and then checked the river. So Charlie's line just kind of looks full of shit here. Gets villain to put in more money with his bluffs, gets villain to put in more money when he does have a jack on this river, and Charlie check raised small enough on this river where I think he does get hero called by jack X at a reasonable frequency. And final results here after hand 5, part 3. Corey up about 13.76K, good for 323 big blinds. Charlie up about 14.2K for 409 big blinds. Kind of the cash results are a little bit misleading. If you look at the big blind results here, Charlie won about 85 more big blinds across 7 hands here, which is pretty significant. And my biggest takeaway here isn't the results, it's the thought process. I'm always trying to prioritize process over results. And after listening to these hands, first of all, I just want to give props to Corey because I thought Corey played really well, especially for a self-described low-stakes player. Charlie is a world-class high-stakes crusher and coach. It's not going to be a fair comparison, but I thought Corey really held his own here and did a great job overall. But to me, the biggest difference between how these two players thought about hands was Corey kind of came up with a decision and then came up with reasons to support his decision, whereas Charlie kind of walked through more scenarios, kind of considered this path, considered this path, considered this path, and then decided which path to go down before trying to justify his decision. To me, that was the biggest difference in thought process I saw between these two players. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it was illuminating seeing the difference between a low stakes grinder and a high stakes crusher. Hope this turns you into one of the biggest boys possible. Thank you guys. As always, have a gentle day.